Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today's update is the continuation of the 10th chapter titled Cities of the Gods in Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet. Sumerian texts confirmed by later Akkadian translations list the original settlements or cities of the Nephilim in the order in which they were established. We are even told which god was put in charge of each of these settlements. A Sumerian text believed to have been the original of the Akkadian Deluge tablets relates the following regarding 5 of the first 7 cities. After kingship had been lowered from heaven, after the exalted crown, the throne of kingship, had been lowered from heaven, he protected the procedures, the divine ordinances, founded 5 cities in pure places, called their names, laid them out as centers. The first of these cities, Eridu, he gave to Nedimud, the leader. The second, Bad Tibira, he gave to Nugig. The third, Larak, he gave to Paboshsag. The fourth, Sapar, he gave to the hero Utu. The fifth, Shurupak, he gave to Sud. The name of the god who lowered kingship from heaven, planned the establishment of Eridu and 4 other cities and appointed their governors or commanders, is unfortunately obliterated. All the texts agree, however, that the god who waded ashore to the edge of the marshlands and said, "Here we settle," was Enki, nicknamed Nedimud, he who made things, in the text. This god's 2 names, Enki, which is Lord of firm ground, and Ea, which was whose house is water, were most appropriate. Eridu, which remained Enki's seat of power and center of worship throughout Mesopotamian history, was built on ground artificially raised above the waters of the marshlands. The evidence is contained in a text named by S. N. Kramer, The Myth of Enki and Eridu. The lord of the watery deep, the king Enki, built his house. In Eridu he built the house of the water bank. The king Enki has built a house. Eridu, like a mountain, he raised up from the earth. In a good place he had built it. These and other most fragmentary texts suggest that one of the first concerns of these colonists on Earth had to do with the shallow lakes or watery marshes. He established the cleaning of the small rivers. The effort to dredge the beds of streams and tributaries to allow a better flow of the waters was intended to drain the marshes, obtain cleaner, potable water, and implement controlled irrigation. The Sumerian narrative also indicates some landfilling or the raising of dikes to protect the first houses from the omnipresent waters. A text named by the scholars the Myth of Enki and the Land's Order is one of the longest and best preserved Sumerian narrative poems so far uncovered. Its text consists of some 470 lines, of which 375 are perfectly legible. Its beginning, some 50 lines, is unfortunately broken. The verses that follow are devoted to an exaltation of Enki and to the establishment of his relationship with the chief deity Anu, which was his father, Ninti, his sister, and Enlil, his brother. Following these introductions, Enki himself picks up the microphone. As fantastic as it may sound, the fact is that the text amounts to a first-person report by Enki of his landing on Earth. When I approached Earth, there was much flooding. When I approached its green meadows, heaps and mounds were piled up at my command. I built my house in a pure place. My house, its shade stretches over the snake marsh. The carp fish wave their tails in it among the small geezy reeds. The poem then goes on to describe and record, in the third person, the achievements of Enki. Here are some selected verses. He marked the marshland, placed in it carp and fish. He marked the cane thicket, placed in it reeds and green reeds. And Bilulu, the inspector of canals, he placed the charge of the marshlands. Him who set net so no fishes escapes, whose trap no escapes, whose snare no bird escapes, the son of a god who loves fish, Enki placed in charge of fish and birds. Enkimdu, the one of the ditch and the dike, Enki placed the charge of the ditch and dike. Him whose mold directs, Kula, the brickmaker of the land, Enki placed in charge of mold and brick. The poem lists other achievements of Enki, including the purification of the waters of the Tigris River and the joining by canal of the Tigris and Euphrates. His house by the watery bank adjoined a wharf at which reed rafts and boats could anchor, and from which they could sail off. Appropriately, the house was named Abzu, or House of the Deep. Enki's sacred precinct in Eridu was known by his name for millennia thereafter. No doubt Enki and his landing party explored the lands around Eridu, but he appears to have preferred traveling by water. The marshland, he said in one of the texts, is my favorite spot. It stretches out its arms to me. In other texts, Enki describes sailing in the marshlands in his boat, named Magur, literally boat to turn about in, namely a touring boat. He tells how his crewmen drew on the oars in unison, how they used to sing sweet songs, causing the river to rejoice. At such times, he confided, sacred songs and spells filled my watery deep. Even such a minor detail as the name of the captain of Enki's boat is recorded in figure 128, and it's coming up. So we got the dude in the middle right here, is Enki. In his boat, or the Magur, as Sitchin put it. The Sumerian king lists indicate that Enki and his first group of Nephilim remained alone on Earth for quite a while. 8 Shars, or 28,800 years, passed before the second commander or settlement chief was named. Interesting light is shed on the subject as we examine the astronomical evidence. Scholars have been puzzled by the apparent Sumerian confusion regarding which one of the 12 zodiacal houses was associated with Enki. The first sign of the fish goat, which stood for the constellation Capricorn, was apparently associated with Enki. and indeed may explain the epithet of the founder of Eridu, Alulim, which could mean sheep of the glittering waters. Yet Ea or Enki was frequently depicted as holding vases of flowing waters, the original water bearer, or Aquarius, and he was certainly the god of fishes and thus associated with Pisces. Astronomers are hard put to clarify how the ancient stargazers actually saw in a group of stars the outlines of, say, fishes or a water bearer. The answer that comes to mind is that the signs of the zodiac were not named after the shape of the star group but after the epithet or main activity of a god primarily associated with the time when the vernal equinox was in that particular zodiacal house. If Enki landed on Earth, as we believe, at the start of an age of Pisces, witnessed a processional shift to Aquarius, and stayed through a great year of 25,920 years until an age of Capricorn began. Then he was indeed in sole command on Earth the purported 28,800 years. The reported passage of time also confirms our earlier conclusion that the Nephilim arrived on Earth in the midst of an ice age. The hard work of raising dikes and digging canals commenced when climatic conditions were still harsh, but within a few showers of their landing, the glacial period was giving way to a warmer and rainier climate circa 430,000 years ago. It was then that the Nephilim decided to move farther inland and expand their settlements. Befittingly, the Anunnaki rank and file Nephilim named the second commander of Eridu Alaugar, or he who is rain time brought rest. But while Enki was enduring the hardships of a pioneer on Earth, Anu and his other son Enlil were watching the developments from the 12th planet. The Mesopotamian texts make it clear that the one who was really in charge of the Earth mission was Enlil, and as soon as the decision was made to proceed with the mission, Enlil himself descended to Earth. For him, a special settlement, or base named Larsa, was built by Enki Dunu, or Enki digs deep. When Enlil took personal charge of the place, he was nicknamed Alim, or Ram, coinciding with the age of the zodiacal constellation Aries. The establishment of Larsa launched a new phase in the settlement of Earth by the Nephilim. It marked the decision to proceed with the task for which they had come to Earth, which required the shipping of more manpower, tools, and equipment, and the return of valuable cargoes to the 12th planet. Splashdowns at splashback. I'm sorry. Splashdowns at sea were no longer adequate for such heavier loads. The climatic changes made the interior more accessible. It was time to shift the landing site to the center of Mesopotamia. At that juncture, Enlil came to Earth and proceeded from Larsa to establish a mission control center, a sophisticated command post from which the Nephilim on Earth could coordinate space journeys to and from their home planet, guide and landing shuttlecraft, and perfect their takeoffs and dockings with the spaceship orbiting Earth. The site Enlil selected for this purpose, known for millennia as Nippur, was named by Nibruki, or Earth's Crossing. We recall that the celestial site of the 12th planet's closest pass to Earth was called the celestial place of the crossing. There Enlil established the Duranki, the bond heaven and earth. The task was understandably complex and time-consuming. Enlil stayed in Larsa for 6 shars, or 21,600 years, while Nippur was under construction. The Nippurian undertaking was also lengthy, as evidenced by the zodiacal nicknames of Enlil. Having paralleled the ram Aries, while in Larsa he was subsequently associated with the bull Taurus. Nippur was established in the age of Taurus, a devotional poem composed as a hymn to Enlil, the all-beneficent, and glorifying Enlil, his consort Ninlil, his city Nippur, and its lofty house, the Ikur, tells us much about Nippur. For one thing, Enlil had at his disposal there some highly sophisticated instruments, a lifted eye which scans the land, and a lifted beam which searches the heart of all the land. Nippur, the poem tells us, was protected by, by awesome weapons. Its sight is awesome fear, dread. From its outside no mighty god can approach. Its arm was a vast net, and in its midst were crouched a fast-stepping bird, a bird whose hand the wicked and the evil could not escape. Was the place protected by some death ray, by an electric power field? Was there in its center a helicopter pad, a bird so swift no one could outrun its reach? In the center of Nippur, atop an artificially raised platform, stood Enlil's headquarters, the Kiur, or place of Earth's root, the place where the bond between heaven and earth rose. This was the communication center of mission control, the place from which the Anunnaki on Earth communicated with their comrades, the Igigi, or they who turn and see, in the orbiting spacecraft. At this center, the ancient text goes on to say, stood a heavenward tall pillar reaching to the sky. This extremely tall pillar, firmly planted on the ground as a platform that cannot be overturned, was used by Enlil to pronounce his word heavenward. This is a simple description of a broadcasting tower. Once the word of Enlil, his command, approached heaven, abundance would pour down on earth. What a simple way to describe the flow of materials, special foods, medicines, and tools brought down by the shuttlecraft once the word from Nippur was given. Excuse me. This control center on a raised platform in Lil's lofty house contained a mysterious chamber named the Durga, a mysterious as the distant waters, as the heavenly zenith. Among its emblems, the emblems of the stars, the ME it carries to perfection. Its words are for utterance. Its words are gracious oracles. What is this Durga? Breaks in the ancient tablet have robbed us of more data, but the name speaks for itself, for it means the dark crown-like chamber, a place where star charts were kept, where predictions were made, where the ME, or the astronauts' communications, were received and transmitted. The description reminds us of mission control in Houston, Texas, monitoring the astronauts on their moon missions, amplifying their communications, plotting their courses against the starry sky, giving them gracious oracles of guidance. We may recall here the tale of the god Zu, who made his way to Enlil's sanctuary and snatched away the tablet of destinies, whereupon suspended was the issuance of commands. The hollowed inner chamber lost its brilliance, stillness spread, silence prevailed. In the epic of creation, the destinies of the planetary gods were their orbits. It is reasonable to assume that the Tablet of Destinies, which was so vital to the functions of Enlil's Mission Control Center, also controlled the orbits and flight paths of the spaceships that maintained the bond between heaven and earth. It might have been the vital black box containing the computer programs that guided the spaceships, without which the contact between the Nephilim on Earth and their link to the home planet was disrupted. Most scholars take the name Enlil to mean Lord of the Wind. which fits the theory that the ancients personified the elements of nature and thus assigned one god to be in charge of winds and storms. Yet some scholars have already suggested that in this instance the term Lil means not a stormy wind of nature, but the wind that comes out of the mouth, an utterance, a command of spoken communication. Once again, the archaic Sumerian pictographs for the term En, especially as applied to Enlil, and for the term Lil, shed light on the subject. For what we see is a structure with a high tower of antennas rising from it, as well as a contraption that looks very much like the giant radar nets erected nowadays for capturing and emitting signals. The vast net described in the text, figures 129 just below. In Bad Tabara, established as an industrial center, Enlil installed his son Nanar or Sin in command. The texts speak of him in the list of cities as Nugig, or he of the night sky. There we believe the twins Anana or Ishtar and Utu or Shamash were born, an event marked by associating their father Nanar with the next zodiacal constellation, Gemini, the twins. As the god trained in rocketry, Shamash was assigned the constellation Gur, meaning both rocket and the crab's claw, or Cancer, followed by Ishtar and the lion, Leo, upon whose back she was traditionally depicted. The sister of Enlil and Enki, the nurse, Ninurshag Sud, was not neglected. In her charge, Enlil put Shupak, the medical center of the Nephilim, an event marked by naming her constellation the Maid, or Virgo. While these centers were being established, the completion of Nippur was followed by the construction of the spaceport of the Nephilim on Earth. The text made clear that Nippur was a place where the words, commands were uttered. There, when Enlil commanded towards heaven, that which shines forth rose like a skyrocket. But the action itself took place where Shamash rises, and that place, the Cape Kennedy of the Nephilim, was Sapar, the city in the charge of the chief of the Eagles, where multi-stage rockets were raised within its special enclave, the Sacred Precinct. As Shamash matured to take command of the fiery rockets, and in time also to become the god of justice, he was assigned the constellations Scorpio and Libra, the scales, completing the list of the first 7 cities of the gods, and the correspondence with the 12 zodiac constellations were Larak, where Enlil put his son Ninurta in command. The city lists call him Pabilsag, Great Protector. It is the same name by which the constellation Sagittarius was called. And we're going to go ahead and stop here at the little point right here, which will mark the next update. After this one here, we'll be completing the 10th chapter, titled Cities of the Gods, by in Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet. In conclusion, everyone, I want to take the time to thank every single one of you for being here, for giving me your time. I really do appreciate it. With that being said, I do love every single one of you, no matter where you are in the world. Thank you all.